The sun had not yet risen when Ethan Miller stepped outside his small wooden house. The air was cold, and the ground was still wet from last night's rain. He pulled his old backpack over his shoulder, the same one he had used for 3 years. The zipper didn't close properly, and one strap was almost torn. Still, he held it tightly as if it were something precious. Every morning, Ethan walked 6 miles to his school. There was no bus in his small town in Alabama, and his mother couldn't afford a car. So, he walked. Barefoot sometimes. On muddy roads, under the hot sun, even when it rained. People in town often saw him passing by and whispered to each other, "There goes that poor Miller boy again. Why doesn't his mom just keep him home?" But Ethan never stopped. He smiled politely, nodded, and kept walking. He had a dream that burned quietly inside him. Ethan was only 10 years old, but he had the heart of a grown man. He loved studying, loved learning, and most of all, he loved his mom. His mother, Laura Miller, worked harder than anyone he knew. She cleaned houses in the morning and worked as a waitress at a small diner in the evening. She often came home past midnight, her hands red and dry from washing dishes. Yet every morning, she still made Ethan breakfast, even if it was just a piece of toast and an egg. "Eat, sweetheart," she'd say with a tired smile. "You need strength for your walk." Ethan always smiled back and said, "One day, Mom, I'll buy you a house. You'll never have to work again." Laura laughed softly whenever he said that. She loved his big dreams, but deep inside, she worried. Life was not kind to dreamers in their small town. One morning, the sky was dark, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Ethan wrapped his small notebook in plastic before leaving. "It might rain again," his mom said, standing at the door with a worried face. "I'll be fine, Mom," he said. "A little rain can't stop me." Halfway through the road, the rain began pouring heavily. His shoes soaked, his clothes clung to his skin, but he didn't turn back. He thought about his mom cleaning someone else's kitchen, about her sore hands, and that gave him strength to keep going. By the time Ethan reached school, he was completely drenched. The other kids laughed when they saw him. "Did you swim here, Ethan?" one boy joked. Ethan smiled shyly and sat down at his desk. He didn't reply. He opened his notebook and focused on the blackboard. His teacher, Mrs. Wilson, noticed his wet clothes and muddy shoes. "Ethan," she said gently, "you should have stayed home today." Ethan looked up and said in a soft voice, "Every step I walk takes me closer to my dream, ma'am. I can't miss even one day." Mrs. Wilson's eyes filled with tears. She didn't say anything more, but that day, she gave him an extra sandwich during lunch. After school, Ethan sat under a tree near the playground, waiting for the rain to slow down before walking back home. He looked at the other kids being picked up by their parents in cars. For a moment, a small sadness touched his heart. But then he whispered to himself, "One day, Mom will sit in our car. And I'll drive her wherever she wants." That thought made him smile again. When he finally got home, his mother ran to the door. "Ethan, you're soaked. You could get sick." He laughed and said, "I'm okay, Mom. I just walked a little faster today." She wrapped him in a blanket, and they sat together near their small heater. The rain tapped gently on the window. "Did you learn something good today?" she asked. "Yes," Ethan said with bright eyes. "I learned that no dream is too big even if you have to walk a long way to reach it." Laura smiled but couldn't stop the tears that rolled down her cheeks. She looked at her son, this little boy with big dreams, and prayed silently that life would be kind to him. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Nothing changed much. The road was still long, the shoes still old, and the meals still small. But Ethan's heart never gave up. Every night, before going to bed, he would look out the small window of their home. He could see the lights from the big houses on the hill, the houses where his mom cleaned every morning. One day, he whispered, "We'll have our own light on that hill." Sometimes he wrote little notes and taped them to the wall. "Keep walking. Dreams don't die. For Mom." Those words reminded him why he couldn't stop, even when life was hard. One morning, something unexpected happened. As Ethan walked to school, a car slowed down beside him. A man inside rolled down the window and said, "Hey kid, need a ride?" Ethan shook his head politely. "No, sir. I'm good." The man smiled and drove away, watching the small boy continue walking through the fog. There was something special about the way Ethan walked, not slow, not fast, but with purpose. Like every step mattered. That day, something inside him changed. The road no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a path leading him somewhere bigger, somewhere he was meant to be. He didn't know how or when, but he believed it deeply. Someday, these tired feet would walk into a better life. And that belief, small, pure, and unshakable, was the start of everything that would come next. Years passed, but Ethan Miller was still walking those same dusty roads to school. His shoes were newer now, a kind gift from his teacher, Mrs. Wilson, but life hadn't gotten much easier. His mother still worked 2 jobs, and their small wooden house still creaked when the wind blew. But Ethan had grown. He was now 16, taller, quieter, and even more determined. He didn't talk much about his dreams anymore, he worked on them in silence. One afternoon, after school, Ethan saw a group of kids laughing around a shiny new laptop. They were playing games and showing each other funny videos. Ethan stood nearby, pretending not to look, but deep down he wished he could have one too. That night, as he helped his mom wash dishes at the diner, he asked softly, "Mom, how much does a laptop cost?" Laura looked up, surprised. "Oh honey, a good one costs more than we can afford right now." Ethan smiled. "That's okay, Mom. I was just wondering." He didn't ask again, but from that day on, he started saving every small coin he found, tips from helping at the diner, coins dropped on sidewalks, even change from the grocery store. Months later, a neighbor, Mr. Clark, an old man who lived alone down the road, called Ethan to help mow his yard. Ethan agreed happily. After finishing, Mr. Clark brought out a dusty old box from his garage. "You seem like a hard-working boy," the old man said. "This old laptop doesn't work like it used to, but maybe you can fix it?" Ethan's eyes widened. "Really, sir? You mean it's for me?" Mr. Clark nodded with a smile. "It's yours." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He cleaned the old laptop carefully, piece by piece. It took him 3 days to make it work again. The screen flickered, the battery was weak, but to Ethan, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He didn't use it for games. Instead, he walked to the library every evening, using the free Wi-Fi to learn coding, graphic design, and online freelancing. He watched free tutorials, paused, practiced, and failed again and again, but every failure taught him something new. His mom often found him sitting outside late at night under the yellow streetlight, typing on that old laptop. "Ethan," she said one night, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders, "it's almost midnight. You need to sleep." He looked up and smiled. "One day, Mom, you'll rest." "But I can't rest yet." Laura didn't completely understand what he was doing, but she trusted her son's heart. She saw that same spark in his eyes that had carried him through all those long miles to school. One evening at the library, Ethan overheard 2 college students talking about an online app design contest with a big cash prize. His heart started beating faster. "What's the prize?" he asked quietly. $10,000, one of them replied. "But it's tough. You need to design a creative mobile app." $10,000. To most people, it was just money, but to Ethan, it meant freedom for his mom. That night, he wrote his idea on paper, an app called StepUp, designed to motivate students from poor backgrounds to study, save money, and track their progress daily. He didn't tell anyone about the contest. Not even his mom. He didn't want to promise something he couldn't deliver. For the next 2 months, Ethan worked after school, late into the night. He watched coding videos, practiced design tools, and tested his app over and over again. Many nights, he fell asleep on the table with his laptop still on. His mom would gently turn it off and whisper, "You're going to do great things, Ethan." Finally, the deadline arrived. Ethan clicked submit. His hands were shaking. He whispered, "Please, God, just give me one chance." Days passed. Then weeks. No reply. Life went on as usual. Ethan helped his mom at the diner, went to school, and studied in silence. He almost forgot about the contest. Then one ordinary afternoon, as he was walking home, his phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line read, "Congratulations, Ethan Miller, you've won first place." Ethan froze in the middle of the street. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. $10,000. His heart started racing. His hands were trembling as he whispered, "Mom. Mom, we did it." He ran all the way home, almost tripping over the uneven road. Bursting through the door, he shouted, "Mom! Mom! We won." Laura looked up from the kitchen, confused. "Won what, honey?" Ethan handed her the phone. "The contest, Mom. I made an app and we won." She read the email slowly, her eyes filling with tears. Then she hugged him tightly. "Oh, Ethan. I knew it. I always knew you'd do something amazing." That night, they didn't eat much, they didn't even have time to cook. They just sat together, laughing and crying. Ethan could finally see a small piece of his dream taking shape. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. He didn't want to spend the money on himself. Instead, he told his mom, "We'll use it to build something better, Mom. Something that'll last." Laura touched his cheek. "Whatever you build, Ethan, I know it will come from your heart." And that night, as Ethan looked at the stars through his window, he whispered to himself, "Every step I walked was for this moment. But I'm not done walking yet." The morning after winning the contest, Ethan woke up before sunrise. For the first time in his life, he didn't have to worry about walking miles to school. The $10,000 prize had changed everything. But for Ethan, it wasn't about the money. It was about what the money could create: a better life for his mom, and a chance to build something meaningful. When he looked at his mother that morning, he saw something new in her eyes: hope. She poured him a cup of coffee and said, smiling, "You did it, Ethan. You really did it." He smiled back. "We did it, Mom." That same week, Ethan opened a small savings account in both of their names. Then he used a portion of his prize money to buy a new laptop and some books about programming and business. He named his next big project Miles Ahead. When his mom asked why, he said quietly, "Because every mile I walked got me here." Ethan didn't go out celebrating. Instead, he worked day and night at the small kitchen table. His mother would sometimes wake up at 3 a.m. and find him still typing. "Ethan," she whispered once, "you've already done enough." He looked at her gently. "Mom, this is just the beginning. The dream starts growing." Over the next 2 years, Ethan created small apps and websites for local shops and small online businesses. He didn't earn much at first, just a few $100s here and there, but every client he helped gave him experience, confidence, and connections. One day, a local bakery owner named Mrs. Jenkins called him. I heard you're the smart boy who made that school app, she said. Can you make one for my bakery? Ethan smiled. Of course, ma'am. He built her a simple app that let customers order cakes and pastries online. It wasn't fancy, but it worked and the bakery's sales grew. Soon, word spread across town. The Miller boy builds websites. Before long, Ethan had more clients than he could handle. He was still finishing high school during the day, but every evening he sat at his laptop, creating designs and learning new coding languages. His teacher, Mrs. Wilson, who once gave him a sandwich when he was soaked in rain, heard about his success and visited his house. Ethan, she said proudly, you're becoming someone this whole town will remember. Ethan smiled shyly. Thank you, ma'am. But I just want to make my mom proud. The business takes shape. After graduation, Ethan decided to skip college not because he didn't believe in education, but because he wanted to build his dream his own way. He registered his small company under the same name he had dreamed up, Miles Ahead Technologies. He rented a small office above the local diner, painted the walls himself, and placed his old broken laptop on a shelf as a reminder of where it all began. Every time he felt tired or overwhelmed, he'd glance at that old laptop and whisper, "We started with nothing, remember? Let's keep going." His mom continued to work at the diner, even though Ethan begged her to quit. "Mom, you don't have to keep working," he said one day. She smiled and shook her head. "I'll stop when you're ready to rest too." The test of faith. Not everything was smooth. Some months, business slowed down. Some clients didn't pay on time. Sometimes, his new apps failed completely. Ethan often felt like giving up. One night, after losing an important client, he sat outside in the cold, his head buried in his hands. His mother quietly came and sat beside him. Without saying a word, she handed him a cup of coffee. Finally, she spoke softly, "Ethan, remember when you walked to school in the rain?" He nodded. "You didn't stop then," she said. "Don't stop now. The road didn't get easier, you got stronger." Those words lit a fire in him again. He stood up, smiled, and said, "You're right, Mom. I'm not walking away, I'm walking forward." From that day on, Ethan worked harder than ever. He upgraded his skills, reached out to new clients online, and started getting international projects. His income slowly began to grow from hundreds to thousands of dollars a month. He hired 2 of his classmates to help him with web design and marketing. His small office turned into a buzzing little workspace filled with laughter, coffee, and dreams. A quiet victory. 3 years after winning that first contest, Ethan's company reached a huge milestone: $100,000 in earnings. The local newspaper wrote about him. From walking 6 miles to school to running a successful tech startup, the story of Ethan Miller inspires us all. When Ethan saw the article, he didn't smile for long. He just looked at his mom and said, "This isn't the finish line, Mom. It's just another step." Laura hugged him and whispered, "Every step you take makes me prouder." That night, as Ethan closed his laptop, he stood by the window, looking at the same hill he used to stare at as a child. The big houses on top still sparkled under the moonlight. But this time, he didn't just dream, he planned. He looked at those houses and said quietly, "One day, Mom will have one of those. Not for the money, but for every mile, every tear, and every long night she gave for me." He didn't know when that day would come, but he was closer than ever before. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe it was no longer just a dream. It was a promise. The next few years tested Ethan Miller more than ever before. Running a business was nothing like building a small app. Every decision mattered. Every mistake cost him money and sometimes, even sleep. But Ethan didn't complain. He had been walking through storms long before success ever found him. His small company, Miles Ahead Technologies, had grown from a one-man dream into a small team of 5. They worked from a simple office above the diner where his mom still served coffee and pie. Whenever his team had lunch, they'd see her downstairs, smiling proudly every time someone mentioned her son's name. But success doesn't come without struggle. There were months when projects failed, when payments were delayed, when clients disappeared without paying. Some nights, Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at his computer screen, wondering if he was doing enough. The glow from the monitor reflected the tiredness in his eyes. "Am I really moving forward?" he whispered to himself. Then he would look at the old, broken laptop on the shelf, the one Mr. Clark had given him, and smile weakly. We've come too far to stop now. The promise that kept him going. His mother was still working double shifts. Ethan often told her, "Mom, you don't have to work anymore. I can take care of everything." But Laura would shake her head and say softly, "Ethan, work keeps me strong. You just keep chasing your dream." Her strength gave him courage. Every late night, every stressful project, every challenge he faced it thinking of her. Ethan's company started to gain attention from outside the town. He received an email from a small startup in New York asking if he could design their app. It was his biggest project yet and his first chance to prove himself beyond his small community. He accepted the job. For 3 months, he worked tirelessly. Some days he forgot to eat, and some nights he barely slept. When the project was done, he sent it nervously, waiting for feedback. Days later, the client replied, "This is outstanding work, Ethan. We'd love to work with you again." That one message changed everything. Word spread quickly in the online business world about the young developer from Alabama who delivered beyond expectations. Success, then silence. Ethan started earning real money. Enough to pay off debts, enough to fix the old house, enough to make life easier. But instead of spending on himself, he saved. Quietly. Carefully. He never told his mom how much he was earning. He just told her, "We're doing okay." In the evenings, she would bring him coffee while he worked and say, "Don't forget to rest." He would smile and reply, "I'll rest when you have your new home, Mom." That was the dream, the one goal that guided every single decision he made. But life isn't just hard in the beginning, it gets hard in new ways. As his company grew, so did the pressure. Some employees left for better offers. One of his biggest clients cancelled a major project right before launch, costing him thousands. For the first time since starting, Ethan felt like he was back at zero. He sat in his car late one night, parked near the field where he used to walk as a kid. The air was cold. The sky was dark. He looked out and saw the same long road that once led him to school. He whispered, "You walk this road with nothing, Ethan. Don't forget who you are." The next morning, he walked back into his office with new energy. He rebuilt his plans, called new clients, and restarted from scratch. A small light in the dark. Months later, his perseverance paid off. A major investor noticed his company's app designs online and requested a meeting. Ethan could hardly believe it. The investor was from San Francisco, a man named Robert Hayes, who ran a well-known tech company. Robert said, "Ethan, I've been following your work. You have a rare mix of skill and humility. I think your company has real potential." Ethan listened quietly, nervous but confident. "Thank you, sir. I built this from the ground up. My goal has always been to make something that helps others." Robert smiled. "How about we help each other? I'd like to invest in your company." It took Ethan a moment to process what he just heard. This was the kind of opportunity people dream about. They met several times over the next few months. Robert's company offered to buy a share in Miles Ahead Technologies, and they offered a price Ethan could never have imagined, $2 million. When he told his mom, she nearly dropped the cup she was holding. $2 million, she whispered in disbelief. Ethan nodded, smiling. Yes, Mom. They believe in what we built. She hugged him tightly. Oh, Ethan. I'm so proud of you. The choice. That night, Ethan sat alone on the porch, thinking. He could finally buy everything he had ever wanted: cars, clothes, luxury. But his heart wanted only one thing: to see his mom truly rest. He looked at the stars and whispered, "It's time, Mom. You've done enough." The next morning, Ethan signed the deal. Miles Ahead Technologies officially became a partner company under a large tech firm, and Ethan walked out of that meeting not just as a businessman, but as a son fulfilling a promise. He didn't tell his mom right away what he planned next. He just said, "Mom, take a day off tomorrow. I want to show you something." She laughed and said, "A day off? That'll be a first." Ethan just smiled. "You'll see why." He stayed up all night preparing for what was coming, something he had dreamed about since he was 10 years old, walking barefoot on muddy roads. He looked at the old note still pinned above his desk. "For Mom." He touched it gently and said, "It's finally time." The next morning was bright and peaceful. Birds sang outside, and the air carried a soft warmth that felt almost magical. Ethan woke up early, dressed neatly, and made breakfast for his mom, something he rarely had time to do. Laura came out of her room, surprised to see the table already set. "Ethan, what's all this?" she asked, smiling. He grinned. "Just a little celebration. You and me." They ate together, laughing like they hadn't in a long time. Laura noticed something different about her son that morning. He looked calm, peaceful, as if something heavy had finally been lifted from his shoulders. After breakfast, Ethan said, "Mom, get ready. I want to take you somewhere." Laura frowned playfully. "Somewhere? It's my day off. You're not taking me to another business meeting, are you?" He laughed. "No, Mom. Just trust me." She put on her favorite blue dress, the one she wore only on Sundays, and they got into Ethan's car. It was simple, not fancy, but to Laura, it still felt like a miracle. She remembered all those years when Ethan had walked 6 miles to school, rain or shine. And now, here they were, driving side by side. The drive of a lifetime. They drove out of town, passing the old diner where she still worked. She waved at her co-workers, who smiled and waved back, unaware that this would be her last day ever walking through those doors as an employee. As they drove further, Laura grew curious. "Ethan," she asked, "where are we going?" He smiled softly. "You'll see soon, Mom. Just a few more minutes." They turned onto a quiet street lined with tall oak trees. The air smelled of fresh paint and blooming flowers. Laura looked around, confused. This wasn't a place she recognized. Then Ethan slowed the car in front of a beautiful white house with a porch, a garden full of red roses, and a small wooden swing under a big oak tree. Laura blinked. "Ethan, whose house is this?" Ethan turned off the engine and smiled. His eyes were soft, but his voice trembled slightly. "It's ours, Mom. The moment she dreamed of." Laura stared at him, unable to speak. "What do you mean, ours?" Ethan took her hand gently, placed a small silver key in her palm, and said, "You remember when I was little? I told you one day you'd never have to work again. That you'd have a home where you could finally rest." He pointed toward the house. "This is that home, Mom." Laura's hands began to shake. Her eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, no, this can't be real." He smiled and said softly, "It's real, Mom. Every mile I walked, Every night I stayed awake, it was all for this. She covered her mouth, sobbing quietly as Ethan opened the car door and helped her out. Together, they walked up to the front door. Her steps were slow not because she was tired, but because her heart was too full. When she stepped inside, she gasped. The sunlight poured in through wide windows, filling the house with a golden glow. The living room was warm and cozy. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and on the mantel was a framed picture of Ethan and her from his graduation day. How did you do all this?" she whispered. Ethan laughed lightly. "With hard work, luck, and a promise I never forgot." He led her through each room, the kitchen with its shiny counters, the cozy bedrooms, and finally, a small study with a window view of the garden. On the desk sat something familiar, the old broken laptop Mr. Clark had given him years ago. Laura touched it gently. "You kept this?" Ethan nodded. "Of course. This is where it all began. The rest she deserved." They sat together on the porch, the breeze gently moving the swing. Laura couldn't stop smiling. She looked around the house again and whispered, "Ethan, this is everything I ever dreamed of. But I don't know if I deserve it." He turned to her and said softly, "You deserve all of this and more. You believed in me when no one else did. You worked so hard so I could walk my miles. Now it's your turn to rest." Tears streamed down her face. She reached out and held his hand tightly. "Ethan, I'm proud of you. Not because of this house, but because you never forgot where you came from." Ethan smiled. "I could never forget, Mom. Every road led me back to you." They sat there in silence for a long time, a peaceful silence filled with memories, gratitude, and love. Full circle. As the sun began to set, Ethan looked out at the road beyond the trees. The same kind of road he once walked every morning, long, rough, but full of hope. He whispered, almost to himself, "I used to dream of this moment. I used to imagine what it would feel like to finally give you this." Laura smiled and said, "And how does it feel?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes glistening. "It feels like home." They both laughed softly. Before going inside, Ethan took one last look at the sunset and said quietly, "Every step I took, every mile I walked, was worth it." Laura leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes closed, finally at peace. For the first time in many years, there was no rush, no work waiting, no worry about bills or long walks in the rain. There was only the sound of the wind, the scent of roses, and the warmth of a dream finally fulfilled. Final message, narration ending. Sometimes, success doesn't start with money or luck, it starts with love, struggle, and a promise. Ethan's journey reminds us that no dream is too far, no road too long, and no sacrifice too small when it's made for the people we love. He walked miles to school with torn shoes. But those same feet carried him into a future filled with light. And in the end, it wasn't just Ethan who found a home, it was the dream that finally found its place too.